Okay, everybody, welcome back to another week of Striper Migration Reports from On the Water. My name is Matt Haeffner. I'm the assistant editor at On the Water magazine, and we're going to jump right into things after a quick recap of what happened in last week's video in case you missed it. So we focused on the striped bass fishery and the migration in northern and southern New Jersey. First, we talked to Mike Gleason of Tack Waterman, who discussed targeting stripers with glide baits over mud flats, especially when big schools of bunker are around. Big bunker have been trickling into the northern New Jersey and western Long Island area. Mike also touched on how and when to intercept those big Chesapeake breeders when they're migrating up the coast, which typically coincides with the timing of the Hudson stripers dropping out of the river to begin their migration north. So we'll get a better idea of the timing of that with one of our guests this week. Following Mike Gleason, we had Tom Pagliaroli, or Tom P., from Creekside Outfitters in Waretown, which is the southern central Jersey area, and he discussed backwater strategies for spring stripers and when to expect those Delaware River breeders to head out of the Delaware Bay and begin their run up the coast. This week, we're keeping an eye on that wave of 30-inch class fish that moved into western Long Island Sound last week. And right now, more and more bunker and fresh migratory bass continue to arrive in Raritan and Jamaica Bays in New Jersey and Long Island. But before we touch on what the striper fishing and the migration is looking like around western Long Island and New York City, we're going to discuss Hudson River stripers. All right, everybody. So our first guest this week is the president of the Hudson River Fishermen's Association. Please welcome Mr. Joe Albanese. Joe, how's it going?
Hi, Matt. How you doing? Thanks
I'm
for
doing all right.
asking me to be part of this Hudson River striper migration
Yeah,
discussion.
absolutely. I mean, I'm from Long Island originally, so I'm always interested to know what's going on, kind of back in my home waters. It is important to note real quick before I get into some of the questions that the Hudson River fishery is open right now, but anywhere south of the George Washington Bridge is all strictly catch and release still in New York. So let's just keep that in mind for anybody who's fishing this week. But without further ado, Joe, I wanted to ask you kind of in what general area of the Hudson do you focus most of your spring striper fishing and why?
Okay, so I'll get to that question in a second. I just want to
Okay.
build on the regulations that you were talking about right
Yes.
now. Jessica Best from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. She's the fisheries biologist for the Hudson River estuary, the marine estuary.
Mhm.
She let people know that from April 1st to May 1st, the regulations north of the George Washington Bridge will remain as it's been in past years, 18 to 28 inches. But
Okay.
most likely, I guess, season, come May 1st, that will change to 28 inches to 31 inches,
So the
where
standard
it's been
spot, right?
for years on the coast, right?
Yep.
So be careful, you're fishing the Hudson River north of the George Washington Bridge. May 1st, that regulation is going to change to comply with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries directive to reduce mortality, I guess, or harvest by 28%. So that's going to change May 1st, just so you
Yeah.
know. So
Great. So yeah,
basically,
definitely keep an eye on those dates then if you're fishing up that way.
yep. And of course, it's only one fish within that slot limit.
Exactly.
Basically, where do we fish? We fish mid-Hudson primarily. Okay,
Okay.
that's where most of our guys fish. We have club members in both New York and New Jersey that will fish all different parts of the river. And of course, a lot of our guys are surf fishermen and we fish the ocean as well. But
Right.
right now, our guys are focused on the mid-Hudson, which is basically, around the Tappan Zee Bridge, north of the George Washington Bridge, up
Yep.
past the Tappan Zee Bridge, up towards Haverstraw, and actually as far as West Point, I would say.
Okay.
That's
Gotcha.
where most of our guys are fish. We have a couple of guys that fish further up, but yeah,
And do you
that's where.
are a lot of your guys like I know the club's pretty got a bunch of different anglers in it, but do most people approach it from shore, or is there a lot of trolling that goes on? Because I know a lot of guys put their boats in early on the Hudson.
Yep. Well, a lot of guys have not signed up. We have a striped bass catch, tag, and release derby ongoing right now. It started April 1st, earlier than we've ever started before, because that's when the season opened in New York, April 1st, right? And where March 1st is when it opened in New Jersey in the back bay area. But we weren't prepared to start March 1st, but we started April 1st, and a lot of guys are telling me they still don't have the boats in the water,
Okay.
at this late date. We do have three guys in our club that have been fishing a lot in sort of the Haverstraw area, and they've been reporting that it's been, a slow go. And I think we've seen that comment past weeks on your broadcast
Yeah.
that because of the weather, the coldness of the water and the air and all the rain that we had, the torrential downpour of rain, that's just put everything out of whack. It's
Totally.
an atypical kind of a year this year for Hudson River stripers. So if we want to just start at the lower river, I talked to Jim Frieda yesterday.
Yeah,
Of
let's
Short
hear what's
Catch.
going on, what the spawning run looks like.
Well, what Jim's telling me is that there were a lot of fish in the lower river earlier in March, but then that sort of dissipated. The bite
Okay.
dissipated, when the weather changed. We had that cold spell and all that rain. But prior to that, there were fish up to 40 pounds caught. And then he said they kind of went back out to the triangle area, I guess,
Mhm.
offshore. Um, but last week with all the rain and everything, he's still seeing a lot of fish, marking a lot of fish in the 28 to 35-inch class,
Mhm.
but not a lot of those fish are being caught. He said the fish are very, very lethargic right now, and he
Okay.
doesn't expect them to get for the fishing to improve until the temperature of the water raises to 45 to 47 degrees. And
Right.
then once it gets above that, then he says that's when they're going to really make that push upstream, up the river to start their migration for the spawning run.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like
Mid Hudson,
most of the fish are kind of stacked in the lower portion of the river right now, and it's all those kind of slot to just above slot class.
yes, yes. Now in the Mid Hudson, where a lot of our guys fish, I mean, they can catch fish all year long in the Hudson. There's a lot of residence fish, Mid Hudson. They're in the schoolie size for the most part,
Mhm.
25 inches or so. Um, as long as you're not purposely targeting them, and
Right.
they're just catching and release, okay, they can catch them. But Arch Tackle and Fly Shop in Nanuet, they're telling me exactly that guys have been catching schoolies in the Piermont Haeffner area all along. It's primarily all on bloodworms in those areas
Okay.
off of Piermont. The Piermont Pier, it's all bloodworms. Okay, that's right just north of the Tappan Zee, just south of the Tappan Zee Bridge, that
Right.
area.
I know a few guys that fish up that way, and they say the same thing. It's all pretty much bloodworms. You're just letting them sit out on like mud flats. I think there's a lot of mud flats in that area.
Yeah, and
Okay.
swim shads and other things that seem to work further up river when maybe the water's a little bit clearer, particularly those things work also, but
Okay.
not the Piermont area. It's all bloodworms. That's really what all it is. So you're drowning bait for sure. And then Lee's tackle shop over in Haverstraw saying they're catching all these schoolies on bloodworms up to 30 inches. Right now, he's saying he's not seeing any herring or bunker in the river yet. So he says but he does recommend fishing when there's moving water, which everybody knows that for striped bass, it's got to
Sure.
be moving water. But he's recommending that you're fishing the hour before and the hour after the high tide. He thinks in the river right now, high tide is the best time to be fishing, just before and just after high tide. And he says, but what he's noticing in the last couple of days or so, because of the eclipse and the warmer weather that we've had, that the bite
Mhm.
is starting to pick up. And right now, he's saying that the New York Department of Environmental Conservation is reporting that the Hudson is loaded with bass. And that's
Interesting.
what Scott Haeffner, who was going to join us earlier, he was saying too. He's marking lots of fish,
Okay.
but they're just not biting.
Right.
Because that started to change for them the other day. They started catching
And
the other
so
day.
what class of fish was Scott marking for the most part?
For the most part, they were those schoolie sized fish. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I know that I don't know if there's a Mr. Poseidon, Eric was saying that
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of his guys they're catching fish in what he calls them the bucks. The males are already kind of coming up with there, waiting for the females to come up. But
Sure.
right now, it's primarily those schoolie sized fish, around 25, 30 inches that are at present. The big cows haven't come home yet to spawn, right?
That's good. Well,
They're
I mean, we need
expected.
those smaller fish, you know. I mean, it's good to know that there's so many of them stacked up in the Hudson right now. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely looking like it's going to be a good year, but it's a very atypical year. Like I said, I did also talk to Chris, Captain Chris, up at Keeping It Real Sport Fishing. He's all the way up in Poughkeepsie, so up
mhm.
in the upper part of the river. He said that is a very strange year. Like a few weeks ago, there was a 40-inch bass caught all the way up by the dam in Troy, New York. He
Oh,
goes,
really?
and he actually saw sporadic, brief runs of herring and bunker all the way that far north. But of
That's
course,
great.
they kind of disappeared again now. So it says it's just a very unusual type of a year this year.
Right.
Um, guys, I know that fish the Hackensack River, normally they're catching fish from March 1st on,
Yeah.
hardly catching anything. And the Hackensack is a main tributary to the Hudson River. And those guys are saying normally they're catching a lot of fish. And they've caught fish up to 46 inches the last couple of years. and tag those fish for the Littoral Society. But this year, hardly any fish at all so
Interesting.
far.
I wonder why. Well, so that kind of going back to you mentioned schools of bunker and herring as far north as Troy. So I wanted to ask you, how important is a strong spring herring migration for Hudson River stripers?
It's very important. Striped bass, unlike a lot of other fish, when they're spawning, striped bass are eating the whole time if they're coming upriver. A lot of other fish that, salmon, whatever, that they just want to get the job done and go either, I guess, to complete their life cycle or, get back out to the ocean again. And they're not interested in feeding. Like a shad will hit a shad dart or something like that out of
Right.
anger or curiosity, but it's not because it's hungry, right? But the stripers are feeding the whole way up. So a good strong herring and run is important. Herring and bunker is obviously the main prey items. And, we've been talking a lot with George Jackman. He's the habitat restoration manager for the Riverkeeper. And his main objective there is to remove some of those dams that are no longer of any use, that are blocking passage for those, migratory bait fish to complete their spawning run, right? So the more of those dams that are no longer useful get removed, the more the stronger the herring run and the bunker run will be.
Right. They'll either do like a river restoration project where it kind of restores the river to its natural state, or they implement some sort of fish ladder or fishway to kind of keep, allow those fish to migrate north.
Yes, indeed. Yep. That's his main objective right now.
Gotcha.
I think he has a research grant to do all that kind of stuff.
That's excellent. Yeah, they're doing a lot of that on Long Island right now. I mean, I wrote a story about it years ago for On the Water, like 2 or 3 years ago, about just the revival of the rivers around there and how it could impact, the holdover fishing on Long Island and all that stuff. So it's great work knowing that that's going on. But one of the other things I wanted to touch on was you mentioned it's been an atypical year, but historically, when do you start to see some of those larger breeders start to drop back out of the Hudson to begin their migration north?
Well, I would say, in the June time period, or just prior to that, they're going to start heading back out, the task being completed. And then they'll hit unfortunately, the reports are that there was not a strong young of year class for the Hudson River this past year, which is unfortunate because we've been contributing a lot to that migration every year. As the Chesapeake seems to be going down, down, down. Ours was maintaining a strong feedstock, if you will, of young of the year bass. And one of the reasons for that is there's just not as much fishing pressure on striped bass in the Hudson River as there is in other locations as well. And, all the fighting that's been going on to stop pollution of the river has also, helped that as well. But, like I said, one of the reasons why it's an atypical year is because of the weather we've been having. And, normally the fish will spawn in a certain section of the river when it's the right amount of salinity. But because it's tidal and it's going in and out, that's going to be changing. It's going to be coming. You don't know where exactly in the river that break point is going to be, where it's the right salinity for them to spawn.
Okay, cool. Joe, I think that's pretty much all the questions I had for you. It was great that you gave us a rundown of like what's going on in the lower section of the river, the mid river where a lot of you guys fish, and then also, getting up as far as Troy and Poughkeepsie. It was great insight for, the crowd that's fishing the Hudson River. And last thing I wanted to get into was if somebody wants to become a member of the Hudson River Fishermen's Association, how can they join or where can they join?
So just go to our website. Our new website is thehrfa.org, THEHRFA.org. That's our new website because we are at the HRFA because in the past there used to be multiple chapters. We are the New Jersey chapter. We are the only remaining chapter. And Bob Boyle, who created the Hudson River Fishermen's Association, the founder, if you will, gave us the right to be the HRFA. So that's we changed it. But anyway, just quickly about the history of the HRFA, we did start the Riverkeeper movement, which now there's Riverkeepers all over the globe that make up this Waterkeeper Alliance. We were the first organization to target polluters of the Hudson River. And I could go into a whole big history of our club, but very proud history, though, to say that, we started this whole movement to clean up our rivers in this country. And it's, like I said, it's now a global movement of Riverkeeper organizations. One thing I forgot to mention is that, we have our annual awards dinner coming up this Sunday, April 14th. And we're going to give out our Pete Barrett Award to the member who's done the most amount of work for the organization. We're going to give out a Friend of the Hudson River Award to Emily McGuckin. She's the tagging director for the American Littoral Society. She's the one that finally got us the dart tags to type of spaghetti tag so that you can tag that fish quickly. It's less invasive than the previous tag they were using, and you get back to fishing quicker than before. And lastly, I'm very happy to let you know that we're giving a Robert H. Boyle Lifetime Achievement Award to Pete Barrett, who I know writes for your magazine. And he's written for Fisherman magazine. Everybody knows Pete Barrett. That's a fisherman, I think, that reads the magazines or follows things on social media. Pete Barrett is going to get this Lifetime Achievement Award. All the things that he's done for the HRFA, starting the New Jersey chapter. Sergio Radosi and other people that are longtime members of our club said, without Pete Barrett, there would be no HRFA today. So congratulations to Pete Barrett. And I just want to get that in there.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I mean, Pete is a great columnist. He's been writing the On the Fly column for as long as I can remember for On the Water magazine. And he's got a dedicated following as well for the people who, look forward to his column every month. So that's well deserved. I hope we're not spilling the beans too early and ruining the surprise for him. But yeah, congratulations, Pete Barrett.
He knows. He goes, I'm already embarrassed that you give a Pete Barrett award. I said, well, we're going to embarrass you more. You're getting a new award.
Yeah, at least he's not winning an award named after him. That would be like double negative there.
Yeah.
Joe, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to jump on and talk stripers. And I hope you find a little more time for yourself to get out in the coming weeks. Sounds like it's going to heat up.
Thanks, Matthew. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to head slightly south toward the mouth of the Hudson River, where dedicated kayak fisherman and owner of Todd Candy Jigs, Kevin Ryan, has been chasing striped bass for about a month now. Kevin, thanks for jumping on the call. How goes it?
Hey, it's going good. Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave some great insight last year. I think it was 2 years ago, actually, that you and I did a call like this. So love to learn a little bit more about what's going on this year. We learned from Joe Albanese. It's kind of been an atypical year in some senses for striped bass. So you and I bumped into each other at the Edison Saltwater Expo, and you had already been on fish for a week or two. So I'm curious if you spend much time kayak fishing in the salt marshes and the rivers to start your season, or do you kind of jump right into looking for stripers in the bays out front once those water temps approach like the 50-degree mark?
I end up heading south, like far South Jersey, Toms River area.
Okay.
The back bay, the little back bays over there. And then I migrate towards home and I hit the local rivers like sod banks and so forth. And, it's basically out for resident fish just to get that winter rust out of your system.
Right, exactly. And so where's home for you? You mentioned, is that Staten Island or New York?
Staten Island. Yeah, I'm based out of Staten.
Awesome. Okay. And so what class over the past week, what has been the primary size class of stripers around New York City and Staten Island and even the South Shore of Long Island?
Basically what we've got now is the mass that we have now is about 28 to 35s.
Okay.
In that class inches,
Yeah. That lines up exactly what Joe Albanese was saying. He learned from Jim Frieda, who's a captain out of New Jersey, he's been fishing, the lower portions of the Hudson River and marking a lot of 28 to 31, even 35-inch fish. So it seems like they're kind of stacked up in the lower bay and even outside of the New York Harbor right now.
Yeah, they're stacked all over the place. Getting them to chew has been some days a grind. One day it's a grind, the next day it's lights out. It's very weird. Very weird. Yeah. And of course, the rain we've had, the water's filthy dirty. It's just, we don't get a break.
I was going to say, it throws off the visibility. It throws off the water temperatures. I talked to Mike Gleason about that last week. So that goes off of what Joe Albanese was saying. It's been a very atypical year so far for stripers, but you spend a lot of time or most of your time, I would say, if not all of it, in your kayak. So by Friday of next week, what do you expect to change? Do you think you'll see more like smaller schoolies and slot size fish? Or do you think it'll be kind of a push of some of those bigger fish coming up the coast?
My belief is that the big fish are here. It's just the water temp is keeping them down and they're not actively feeding. So the smaller fish, they react a little better than the bigger ones, So I think the big fish are here. And I think by next Friday, weather pending, of course, and water temperature, I think the big fish are going to start to chew.
So Like when do you start to see does water temperature play a big role in that when you start to see those bigger fish start to feed?
I would say upper 50s, 55. 55 seems to be the money spot. You know,
Okay.
the bigger fish have to really feed heavier. You know, these colder nights, they don't help, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we need some straight spring weather instead of this fluctuation and stuff constantly. But
Yeah, I don't
after
want
the
to see.
new moon, I would imagine a bunch of fish probably moved into the area or at least like staging, getting ready to run up the Hudson, if not already doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the bay, the whole Raritan Bay, wherever you go, you're going to mark fish.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It's crazy. The marks are just nuts.
Yeah.
But out of those, you'll hit one pod, you'll pick 2 or 3 fish out of it, move to the next one. They shut down. You know, they're
Interesting.
not actively feeding. We're just hovering around 50-ish,
Hmm.
and it fluctuates. I'll go out 2 days later after the rain, and I'm at 45 again. I'm like, this is not good,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's going to throw everything off, right? So when you've been finding those schools of like finicky fish, are they generally in that 28 to 35-inch range and they're hitting soft
Yeah,
plastics and stuff?
yeah, all soft plastic stuff. You know,
Yeah.
1 ounce jig head, 5.5 shad gets it done.
Yeah. Those
Very much,
Elias V paddle
very
tails, right?
slow. What's that?
Those are the Elias V paddle tails you just showed us?
Yes, yeah. 5.5 inch and very slow retrieve, bottom bouncing. It's almost like snap jigging, like the
Right.
freshwater do. You know, just
Yeah.
let it sit. I've had fish hit, it's completely not moving, and they hit
Interesting. Yeah, just dead
it.
sticking it.
Yeah,
So have a lot of bunker kind of moved into your area because it sounds like there's a lot more in Jamaica Bay now. I know you're closer on Staten Island, you're fishing Raritan Bay more, but it sounds like bunker have moved into that area, especially now that the new moon has passed with that eclipse.
yeah. As of yesterday, I've been out a few days this week, and yesterday there was definitely a lot more bunker in the area,
Yeah.
which is great. We just need the weather to behave so it doesn't push them in or out. You know.
Right. And they're all adult size bunker.
Yes.
Okay. Going off of the fact that there's all these bunker moving into the area, you and I a couple of years back, we talked more about jigging soft plastics and some of the jigs that you make actually. But one thing we didn't touch on much was fishing flutter spoons from the kayak. And so during the
Yeah.
spring migration, when do you find the prime window to be for fishing flutter spoons around, outside of the burrows and Raritan Bay and things like that?
The same as targeting the bigger fish and getting them active is, of course, A, bunker, and B, water temperature. I would say 55 to 60. Spoon bite's going to heat up crazy,
Yeah.
and it's fun. It's on the kayak. It's totally different. It's savage. Such a hard hit, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine that with some of those bigger fish, or well, with all the adult bunker around, some of those bigger fish that are going to be coming up from the Delaware and Chesapeake, kind of
Yeah.
is that what you're trying to line up with? Like they tend to come up right around that 55-degree mark, I'd imagine.
Yep. And I'll be waiting for them.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so one of the other things I wanted to ask you about the flutter spoons is what setups do you use for flutter spoons from the kayak and why do you use those setups?
Okay. My main setup would be it's a Challenger rod, black hole 731 custom rod, and a Shimano Twin Power 4000.
Okay.
And spoons, I'll use, believe it or not, freshwater spoons work freaking great if they're finicky, like a smaller, not the 9 inch, like a
Right.
6 or 7 inch spoon. They key in on that, and it's a lot easier to work on the yak,
Right. Right.
instead of having
Absolutely.
a 9 inch spoon flying all over. But sometimes they want that big profile too.
Because you mentioned you use a twin power, I know a lot of people prefer conventional tackle. Is there a reason you favor your spinning tackle for flutter spoons?
I was from day one. I always used spinning, and that's all I've ever used.
Yeah.
And I see no adverse effects of using spinning as or conventional.
So we discussed with Joe that there were a lot of Joe Albanese that there are even some fish pushing 40 pounds up by Poughkeepsie and Troy in that area of the Hudson River. So being
Okay.
that some of those fish are already up there, when do you expect those fish to drop out of the Hudson and kind of hit your area?
I would say within the next week or two.
Oh, really? Okay, that early.
Is my thought. Yeah, because usually by now we're catching fish close to that 40-inch range, upper 40-inch range.
Yeah.
We're definitely a week or two behind.
Okay.
In my eyes, that's where we are.
Gotcha. So have you seen many migratory fish in your area so far? I mean, like you said, it's been a lot of those 28 to 35s, but how do you know if those are resident fish or not are there sea lice on any of them or?
The resident fish, unfortunately, seem to always have red fins and spots just from wintering over and getting beat up.
Right.
Let's see, Sunday and Monday, we had fish full of sea lice, like fresh, crazy stripers. They do hit different than the residents.
Right. They're a little more riled up, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And they're crazy. They don't stop. I'm like, oh my God. But I love it. More the better,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's pretty much all the insight we were looking for is, when those fish are going to drop out of the Hudson and how you plan your outings around those fish coming up when from the Chesapeake and Delaware when it reaches about 55 degrees. So you said, I don't know, another week and a half or so until those water temps fall in there?
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, Kevin. Well, thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it. This has been great, and best of luck the rest of the spring run, my friend.
All right, cool. Well, listen, stay in touch and let me know when you want to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm going to try to get down there towards the end of April. So it'd be great to get out on the kayak with you if we can make that work.
Okay, very cool. Just let me know.
Will do. All right. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
You got it, bro. Be good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So based on those reports from Joe Albanese and Kevin Ryan, it does seem that the typical spring migration patterns of stripers have been a little bit out of whack this spring due to some excessive rain and lower than usual water temps. However, with a stretch of warm spring weather in the forecast, the new moon having just passed, and more bunker arriving by the day, bigger and more aggressive migratory bass are on their way. For now, there are plenty of resident fish to be caught alongside a recent push of 28 to 35-inch migratory bass that moved into the waters around northern Jersey and New York City last weekend. And as those bunker continue to file into Jamaica Bay, Raritan Bay, and New York Harbor, and water temperatures steadily approach the low to mid-50s, we can expect those bigger migratory fish from the Delaware and Chesapeake to stop off in New York and enjoy a buffet of bunker and even herring as we head into the second half of April. But remember, striped bass fishing is strictly catch and release until April 15th for New York anglers south of the George Washington Bridge, and anglers north of the GW have until May 1st to enjoy their lower slot limit before the coastwide 28 to 31-inch slot is implemented for the remainder of the season. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks again to our guests Joe Albanese of the Hudson River Fishermen's Association and Kevin Ryan of Todd Candy Jigs for filling us in on the current state of the striper migration in and around the Hudson River. We'll check back next week with more updates from a different region of the striper coast. But until then, check out On the Water Striper Cup. It's a 20-week catch and release based striper fishing tournament where you can win weekly prizes from Yeti, Penn, Bubba, and Costa sunglasses just for catching striped bass and submitting your photos on stripercup.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you during next week's Striper Migration Report from On the Water.